Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Moving Encounters. I am Carolina Garcia, and this is episode 6. So, we're going to be diving into the world of UFOs with a story about a podcast that's capturing the imaginations of audiences worldwide right now. So, first up, the realm of unidentified flying objects or UFOs. It has long been a mystery, but one voice is cutting through the noise with a unique approach that's both rational and engaging. So, let's talk about why the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast, hosted by Kelly Chase, is winning over the hearts and minds across the globe. So, Kelly is not your average podcaster. With a structured, science based exploration of UFOs, she's drawing in skeptics and seasoned ufologists alike. Ranked in over 90 countries and sitting among the top 1% on Spotify, her podcast is taking the world by storm. So, today we're going to find out how she's achieving this monumental task. Chase's secret power. A nonsense approach paired with collaborations and a significant media presence. This, together with content that's as educational as it is accessible, ensures that both newcomers and knowledgeable enthusiasts, researchers, and experts find value. So let's just go ahead and dive into it and welcome Kelly in. So, hi, Kelly. It's fantastic to have you here. How are you?
Oh, I'm so great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. I have been really excited about this to sit down and chat with you. Um, you know, just recently, I've seen a lot of your work just really stand out amongst the crowd. And I just really want to kind of dive in, get to know you a little bit more, and then just start from the beginning of your journey and go from there. And so first, just introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about your background, and then of course, that $1 million question: what inspired you to start UFO Rabbit Hole podcast?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for all the kind words about the podcast. I really appreciate that. Um, it's fun. It's so funny telling this story because this has become so not just a huge part of my life. It's really become my life. This is kind of what I do from the time I wake up till the time I go to bed. But just like 3 years ago today, I wasn't thinking about UFOs. I didn't believe in UFOs. I hadn't had it wasn't on my radar at all. But as a lot of people in the community will remember, as we were in 2021 in the spring going into the summer, where we kind of had that looming UAP report coming out. Suddenly, it was on 60 Minutes. It was in the news. The government acknowledged that some of these leaked Navy videos were actually real. And so I noticed it. Like it kind of broke through the noise for me. And it was coming out of the pandemic. And, we'd all been locked down for so long. And I was going with some family and friends back to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, which is where I had actually seen a UFO as a kid. And I just didn't, I just, it was so weird that I had seen one, but then I didn't believe in them. I think that happens to a lot of people where you see one and you don't know how to explain it. But like to take that leap and say it's a UFO and to consider what that might mean is just too much. And so you just don't. But I figured, all right, I'm going back to the scene of the crime, back to where I saw one, and I'm going to dive into this and I'm going to figure out what UFOs are. And obviously, I did not accomplish that in a week. But what I did find was that there was just so much more to it than I ever could have expected. I found that I had no idea what was going on, but that it was so clear to me that something significant was going on. And I just kind of became obsessed. And so I dove into research. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. And um, I just for months and months at a time, just like reading and reading and obsessing. And kind of in the midst of all of that, in August of that year, I ended up having an kind of an anomalous experience that's a little bit hard to describe. And we can dive into that more, um, if you'd like to. But for the most
Sure.
part, really, I don't know how to describe it. I did a whole episode about it because it's hard to describe.
Right.
But I basically had this experience where I kind of felt like I saw a lot, where I saw the universe in a different way, and I saw myself in a different way, and it was very short, but it was extremely impactful. And I came out of that experience feeling like I was really clear on what my purpose was, and that I was supposed to start this podcast. And I kind of understood how everything in my life had been leading me up to this moment, and that I had the skills that I needed to do this thing. And so I decided to do it. And I was coming out of a marketing background. I was a brand director for an e-com company at the time, and I'd spent years working in like content and PR, and branding. And so like so much of what I had spent my life doing was figuring out how to get the right message in front of the right person at the right time so that it would cut through the noise and they would do something about it. Right. And so I kind of wanted to take that skill from marketing and put it towards, getting people to just recognize that there's something going on here and to look into it a little bit deeper. And so that was really kind of the approach that I took. And as I was doing all my research, what I didn't find anywhere was like an on-ramp to the topic. There's no like UFOs 101. Like there's no
Yeah.
good place to start. And like it's such a vast topic. And so I took a stab at it, at kind of creating that like UFOs 101. And the podcast has really kind of followed my own journey down the rabbit hole. And I've been really shocked and kind of surprised at the success that it's had. And it's been an incredible journey. And I've met so many of like my best friends along the way. And it's so wild to me that this has happened and that my life has changed so quickly and so profoundly. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm having a really great time, and I'm just really grateful to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a few things stuck out. One, so I'm in North Carolina and I've been to the Outer Banks, a lot of activity there. And that's just a side note. So I'm not even surprised that that's where you experienced it. And then, you know, another point that you made too is that transition from your, agency type of corporate world into making this a full-time thing for you. So, how was that transition, and were there any struggles that you experienced? How did you feel about taking that leap? Because it's, a pretty huge step.
It was. It was. So for the first year that I was doing the podcast, I was still working full time, and I was just doing this like when I could. And so I was really kind of waiting. I was like, all right, if I can build this up to the point that I have like, we're basically like, I'm replacing the income that I would be losing, and I can do this in a responsible manner, then I'm gonna take the leap. But near the end of 2021, I was lucky enough to be invited by J. Christopher King and James Ian Doley to co-host the first two Inquire Anomalous conferences out in New York City. And before that, I had like very minimal contact with other people in the community. I was kind of like hanging back, and I think I was kind of self-conscious because I was so new to all of this that I was like, who the hell am I to even like put myself forward as an expert of any kind? Like I was just figuring things out for myself. So I kind of hid and just put out my podcast and never really talked to anybody. But once I kind of plugged into the community, I think I'm somebody who's kind of felt like my whole life, like I've always had lots of family and friends and stuff, but I've always also had this sense that I never quite found my people, that I had traveled the whole world, and that I had never quite found the place where I fit. And I was okay with that. But then when I entered the UFO community, I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, this is who I've been looking for all this time. And so I was really inspired by that. And also, I'm sure as you've experienced as someone who's, diving into this world, once you start connecting with people in the field, there's sort of like a magic that happens, like the connections that
Yeah.
form and the relationships that are so productive, both personally and professionally. And so it was December, right after that second Inquire Anomalous conference. And I went to my husband and I was like, I think I am just going to do this. And actually, he was my fiance at the time. And so I was like, how about we don't have a big wedding? What if we got married in like 6 weeks so that I can have health insurance?
Wow.
And we just do it. And I did it, and I ended up cashing out my 401k to make that happen. And I got
Wow.
really lucky actually, because I went in on like January 2nd, right after Christmas, ready to quit. And I ended up getting laid off that day with like the entire
Oh,
team I was on,
wow.
which was
That's amazing.
great because I got like
That's amazing.
3 months of extra like severance.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a little more of a runway. So I just went for it. And it was really scary to take that dive. And I've definitely do not make the kind of money I was making in the corporate world doing this, but I've found a balance with all of it, and I'm so much happier. Like I'd so much rather be making less and doing work that leaves me so like fulfilled and happy,
Yeah.
rather than I wasn't happy in the corporate world, and I'm much, much happier now.
I can definitely relate to all of the things that you just said, especially as a newcomer. There's been a lot of moments where I've felt like almost imposter syndrome. But then I realized, like, hey, I am new to this, and um, I'm learning as I go. And then I think this is something that you mentioned too in one of your latest episodes. It's that it's not something that you had almost planned. It's just something that happened and it organically just unfolded and it was effortless and it just felt right. And, for me, same thing. It gave me a bit more purpose, that feeling of fulfillment, but then also coming out of it with just, it's just mind blowing, like going down that rabbit hole and you can't come up for air because of the interest. And so, I kind of want to transition into going back to that episode 35. So I'm going to read something, it's a quote from that episode where you said, "It still wasn't something that I really like to think about. The idea that something unexplainable happened to me that instantly changed me and set me on an entirely different course in my life was deeply uncomfortable." And then you say, "If I'm being honest, even now it makes me feel a little crazy. I don't like the implications. I don't like the way that it sounds." So, you know, that that was very, to me, well, first of all, thanks for sharing your experience, because you have to be get vulnerable with yourself to be able to kind of share. And so thanks for doing that. Because I remember episodes before that you had mentioned, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put out this episode, and I literally waited for it, and I was like, I think it's supposed to come out this week. And so glad that you did put it out. And spoiler alert if you haven't listened to it yet, but um, the introduction, the opening to the episode was so cool, and it had me laughing really hard on the what was it, the saliva, right? Is it
Oh, salvia. Yeah, yeah.
salvia.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just had this picture in my mind of you and your friends and sitting there trying this for the first time, and then your friends' expressions, and then you're just like, I'm gonna go for it anyway and just dive right in. So, I think that's what makes the podcast so successful too, is the way that you paint that picture and are able to really just guide listeners through that story. So, how do you feel now that you have shared this with everyone? What has the reaction been? How do you feel about it? Do you wish you had or hadn't? How did that leave you?
Yeah, thank you. I feel great. I'm really glad that I did it. It was months in the making. Um, Literally months in the making, and I was really kind of freaking out near the end. Coming forward with something like that really does feel kind of like jumping out of a plane. It's absolutely terrifying. And I'm so lucky that I have some really close friends who are experiencers and who are public experiencers who
Yeah.
have gone through this process. Um, in particular, like J. Christopher King is one of my best friends,
Mm-hmm.
and like he's been an incredible person to talk to through all of this because he's gone through something similar with coming forward. And Mike Cleland is another really good friend of mine who's really helped me through this. And I've been really happy to have people to talk to about it. But as soon as I did it, the first of all, the response was overwhelming. It's been by far, I there's always this feeling, I think, at least there was for me, where I was like I don't talk about myself much on the podcast because I'm like, who the hell cares about me? Like, I'm literally just, Kelly from Ohio. Like, this is about UFOs. Like,
No.
let's get to the good stuff. But it's been by far my most successful episode. It turns out people I think because they have been on this journey with me, did kind of want to understand
Yeah.
how I got here. And so that was really nice to feel that connection from the community and to feel like I took that leap and that the community caught me and that felt really, really good. And I've gotten at this point literally hundreds of emails and messages and DMs from people who have said not just like, hey, I really like the episode, but I went through something similar. And I'm so
Hmm.
grateful to hear somebody talk about it because I had never heard somebody talk about something quite like this before. And it made me feel less alone, or it made me think about what happened to me a little differently. And to me, like, I can't think of anything kind of more gratifying or fulfilling than that. And just because I think that so many people, I don't think that anomalous experiences are all that anomalous. I think that, human beings in a lot of ways are set up to have these experiences, and they might only happen to you a couple times in your life. But when they do, they're really profound and that they can be really fruitful, but not if we like shut them down and reject them and decide that they didn't happen or that we're crazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful to be in a position to share and that people were willing to listen. And I hope that we're moving into a phase of, human civilization where suddenly we're able to talk about these things again, because it's really only recently in the last couple hundred years that it's become taboo to talk about the
Yeah.
things that we can't explain. And so that's been really, it's been a beautiful experience, and I'm so glad that I did it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, it being such a profound experience for you, how has that shaped your view of or perception of reality? And do you have any theory or maybe explanation for yourself that you personally feel the phenomena is? Yeah.
That's a great question. I'll take the first one first. So it's definitely changed how I think about reality. Before it happened to me, um, I was like a strict atheist and like a physicalist, materialist, however you want to call it. And I was really comfortable with that worldview. Like no doubt in my mind. And I because I didn't feel like I'd ever seen evidence in my life for something more than that, which now when I look back, I realize is kind of ridiculous, because when you're in this mind frame where, because like I had seen a UFO, but I didn't believe in UFOs, right? I'd actually seen two UFOs and I didn't believe in UFOs.
Wow.
I'd lived in a house that like even my mom will tell you to this day was like haunted. Like we don't know, I can't explain it in any
Oh,
other
wow.
way than there was, and so I think that on the one hand, I'm suddenly much more open to a version of reality that's much more kind of enchanted and interesting. And I don't have this kind of hubris that I think is really common in our culture of thinking like we have it all figured out, and if it doesn't make sense, then it's not real. And it's given me kind of an ability to embrace mystery again, and also to
Yeah.
really get excited about it. We're not just like going to woo woo land and staying there forever. Like it's re-engaged me with like science and physics and philosophy and all of these things, and it's made me much more, it's made everything much more interesting, because when there's a mystery to be solved, then suddenly all of these things become a lot more interesting. So I think that's really cool. And as for what I think the phenomenon is, i don't I don't know. I think it's really complicated. I think part of it is us, and I don't mean that in a way that like we're imagining it or we're making it up in our heads, but whatever, there does seem to be something that's guiding us towards some outcome that's helping us evolve, that's connecting us together, and that helps us meet challenges throughout history and helps us to be innovative in ways that we might not be otherwise. And so there's something about that I find really cool, that we're in some way in relationship with whatever this is, and that there's a really beautiful side to it. There's scary sides to it too, and we can't deny that. And I think probably what we're dealing
Yeah.
with is really complex, and it's probably not just one thing, but
Right.
but whatever it is, I think that there's a part of it that I feel very close to, that I think is here to help, and
Mhm.
and that gives me a lot of hope about myself and about the world in general.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, the experience that you had was profound enough to almost change your life, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, for me personally as well, I didn't believe in UFOs. I honestly thought UFOs were a sci-fi, just Star Trek like category in Netflix. I honestly did not know anything or was interested in any of it. And, not until you have some kind of experience that sparks that interest, whatever it may be, and keeps you kind of well, it kind of pulls you in, doesn't it? And it engages you. And um, so, do you feel like this whole phenomena, how does it continue to challenge you? Is it still challenging you? Because it's hard work to like it's commitment, right? What you do is commitment. You have to be truly obsessed and committed to do this and to consistently put out quality content. So, how does this topic challenge you? And, does it continue to surprise you?
It does. It does. I actually had a really cool experience this week because I was down
Yeah.
in Texas with my media company on Talyse Productions, and we're filming a docuseries that'll be out in early summer. And there's an experiencer story. I don't want to give it away because it's so cool and it's a new one that people haven't heard before. But we were going to this ranch and we were going to tell this story, and I've felt really compelled to tell this story for a long time. Like, this person who we were working with is one of actually the very first people that ever reached out to me when I started doing the podcast. And I've just sort of had this feeling, and we've been brought together in all these kind of like weird synchronistic ways that tend to happen when you are doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
And I went there, like we went all the way to Texas and out to this guy's ranch, just kind of like on the faith that we were going to know how to tell this story when we got there. And sure enough, like the way that everything came together, it ended up being so much better than I ever could have planned. And I found that I didn't go into the process of creating a docuseries with the idea that I was going to be like learning things about the phenomenon along the way, mostly because that just doesn't feel very practical when you're like trying to put together this thing. Like, it seemed that just wasn't it just wasn't where my head was. My head was like, we've got to get
Yeah.
this done and hit all these notes and everything. But I ended up finding myself coming away from that experience being like I came here on faith and I left with a greater understanding of what it is that I'm doing and why it's important to me and what I think it is. And that was really profound. And so I think that the phenomenon, the way that it really challenges me is that it keeps pulling me out of my shell and keeps pulling me out of
Hmm.
myself and out of my preconceived notions, puts me in these very bizarre scenarios, and I come out of it better and knowing more and feeling more. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And so I think I'm grateful for the drive and the curiosity to keep engaging with it in this way because it just pays off all the time.
No, absolutely. And it's definitely, not a boring subject to look into. So that's definitely a plus. So yeah, you mentioned that you and Jake Christopher King, that you guys are on this venture now, and you started on Tacalypse. Is that how you pronounce
Yes.
it?
Uh-huh.
Productions. Okay, cool. So what's the story behind that? Like, how did this come to be? How did it form? And yeah, how did you guys decide to do this?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I met Jay for the first time when I was co-hosting those early Inquire Anomalous conferences. And, I've met so many cool people through this field, but like Jay is somebody that I just like immediately hit it off with. Like Jay is somebody that I would hang out with if like neither of us were into UFOs at all. Like we're just
Yeah.
good friends, and he like really makes me laugh. And so we had kind of stayed in contact and we're working together on things. And in like the spring of last year, we had gone to the archives of the Impossible Conference. And coming out of that, I just had this really deep sense that I was like, that the podcast wasn't all I was supposed to be doing, and that I really wanted to get more into media, but I wasn't exactly sure how to make that happen. And at that
Hmm.
point, I'd had like a few people reach out to me about like potential, like, you know, roles in television shows or, those kinds
Yeah.
of gigs that had all fallen through. And I also was kind of finding I didn't really want that because like I just felt like there was a lot that I was being asked to give up in those particular situations and that it wasn't really me. It was like me trying to fit into this other
Yeah.
space that like wasn't me. And so I just kind of like put it out to the universe that like I need collaborators. And I didn't even realize at that time like how extensive Jay's background is in, film and television. Like he went to film school and he's very, very
Yeah.
talented. And he worked in television for years for kind of like Discovery Channel type shows. And we ended up both being invited out by our now other business partner, Jordan Flowers. He, over the summer, there were just a lot of us who were kind of feeling like there was like this next step that needed to happen.
Yeah.
And so he invited us out to his house for a weekend and we just kind of like hung out with probably like 10 other people who all were like in various stages of doing things in the community. And we kind of walked away, like me and Jordan and Jay, with like a really good understanding of each other and where we all wanted to head. And it just happened really naturally and organically from there. So we had a few more meetings. We ended up forming the production company. In July, Jay and I flew out to New York and did a treatment of the 3 episodes we're working on with Jay. And yeah, we went from there. We were extraordinarily lucky in how everything came together. We had to raise some money and we ended up um, raising 6 figures for this project, like kind
Oh,
of
wow.
effortlessly, which to me is, I'm not the kind of person who has people like just handing them checks all the time. 6 figures is a lot of money in the world that I come from. But it just kind of came together and yeah, it's been a really beautiful, magical
Oh.
experience. And I can't wait to share it with everybody. I think it's going to be something that people haven't seen before.
Well, congratulations on that. It sounds like you guys are definitely going to come with something, fresh and new, which I think is needed. So that's I will definitely be looking out for that. Um that was one of the things that I was going to ask you about too is so when can we expect like first episode or new work coming out with this project? Anytime this year or long term?
Yeah, so we do have a premiere set up. I don't think the details have been announced, so I don't think I'm allowed to share that yet. But look for it at like the end of May. We'll be doing a premiere, and then we're hoping that all 3 episodes will be available either at that time or like very shortly thereafter. So like June of this year, you should look for it. It'll be on Amazon Prime and on Apple
Oh,
TV.
nice.
And so yeah, we're just a couple months out. We're full steam ahead. It's kind of all we're doing right now. And then yeah, and then I think we're going to basically start rolling into, writing and fundraising for season 2 after that. So
Nice.
we're just going to keep it rolling. Yeah.
I was going to ask you too, where um do you see yourself? Well, I was going to ask, where do you see the podcast in 5 years, right? But 5 years in podcast land is probably an eternity. So 2 years, where do you want to see yourself with this particular work?
That's a great question. To be honest, I'm not sure. I love the podcast and I'm going to do the podcast for as long as it makes sense. But like I have aspirations that are, kind of beyond just what I can
Hmm.
accomplish in a podcast format. It's been really kind of a revelation to link up with Jay and he's like the other half of my brain. And so, and we really trust each other. And so, um, I really want to move into kind of like great, like other kinds of media as well as we're doing right now. I think that I'm really inspired by what is possible when in collaboration with others, basically. Like, I'm really,
Hmm.
really proud of what I've done with the podcast, but it's kind of a one woman show, and there's only so much I can do. And
Yeah.
the more people I'm able to kind of work with and bring in and so I'm really interested in kind of like team building right now and finding other people in the space, whether it's researchers or, videographers and everything in between who are kind of working in the space and just seeing what comes around naturally. But we have big aspirations to really grow on Tacalypse in the next few years, which the way that kind of looks to us right now is um, hopefully more seasons of the show. We're also standing up a publishing house, like a press. So we've already published one book with Dr. James Madden, his book Unidentified Flying Hyperobject, which has really quickly become a new classic of the field. And we really want to kind of keep that level of
Yeah.
quality. And so we're going to be publishing, doing a lot of publishing over the next few years with the right projects. And then I think the UFO Rabbit Hole at some point will probably be retired, and then I'll move on to something that's maybe under the Ontocalypse banner, just so that there's like more hosts, more researchers, more writers. So it's not just me, just because when I'm doing the podcast, it's like, I don't really have time to do anything else. And I want to be kind of
Yeah.
at this like higher storytelling level. But I don't feel like I need to be doing every single thing, you know?
I totally get what you're saying. You kind of remind me of myself in a way that, you know, you have a lot of different ideas that you really want to achieve, or a lot of different goals, and they're big ones, but, you know, we kind of aim to overachieve and put more on our plate, but we stay focused, right? That's what's important.
Exactly.
So your presence as well on Twitter, and that the platform itself is, so whenever I'm in Instagram, that's a completely different world than the Twitter world. They're more out, UFO Twitter is very a lot of opinions, personalities going on, as well as skeptics and trolls, and just people hanging out who just want to just put a cloud in your day. So how do you deal with skepticism or pushback, or just rude people in general? How do you deal with that?
It really took some time, and I'll say that the drama on UFO Twitter early on, like, really almost derailed me. Like, kind of, I would say, like, especially, like, 2022 going into, like, 2023, I was just like, I was like, "You know what? If I can't find a way to do this work without getting so upset and stressed out by what's going on Twitter, like, I'm gonna have to just quit." Because it was like, I was like, "It's not even worth it to me to feel
Oh,
this and to deal with all of that." And so, but that was actually a really good growing experience for me, and I'm so glad that I went through that hard moment, because I can honestly say, like, a little over a year since I was like literally ready to quit because of it, I it doesn't register for me anymore. I One thing is, I block early and often, and I don't care. Like, I don't think that there are people who are like, "Oh, you're gatekeeping, or you're shutting down the conversation," or, and like, no, like, you have all of God's green
yeah.
internet to say literally anything you want about me, but like, it doesn't need to be to me. Like, I don't need to see it. And like, trust, I get enough bad opinions about me on a daily basis. The part of doing this work and with my podcast getting to the size that it is that, for better or worse, I hear what hundreds, if not thousands of people think about me every single day. And so, like, it's not like I'm missing that data point, you know? Um, so there's that. But also another thing that's happened is that, like I have made friends in this field with people that I really respect and who are heroes
Yeah.
of mine in a lot of ways, who really see and respect and like what I'm doing. And so, like, why am I privileging the opinion of some, like,
Mm,
you know, dude on Twitter who's got like 47 numbers after his name and just set up his account yesterday over,
yeah.
the opinion of like Jeff Kripal or like Whitley Strieber, or like these other people who like really like the work that I'm doing. And you can kind of choose like who it is that you're going to listen to. And a lot of it is just like, I had to like kind of train myself to like not have an emotional response to it. Because the thing that happens is that I get these long, beautiful messages from people all the time who have such beautiful things to say about the podcast. And like, it's not, and the reality is that I had to recognize in myself is that those don't hit in the same way as like one person saying one snarky thing hits. And like, there's something, and so I had to just recognize that like our brains are set up to identify problems and threats. And so I had to kind of reprogram myself in that way to just,
Yeah.
And I'm to the point where I can genuinely say, like, every once in a while, I'll get a nasty email at just the right time on a day when things are hard that it gets to me. But for the most part, I've been able to really tune it out. And I think that that's helped me, like, I just feel so much kind of like more grounded and sure of myself
Yeah.
than I ever have in my life. And so I'm kind of glad that I had that I had to overcome that because it was beneficial.
Yeah, no, I love that message too because it also shows, the how complex it is not just to A, have a podcast, and B, it being about UFOs, which is already hard for people to accept, but then also everything that comes along with putting yourself out there. And um but I mean, I will say I think you do an amazing job at how you handle certain feedback. I mean, scrolling through Twitter, I don't know what post it was, but it was something somebody said and you shut them down very professionally, but like firmly. And I was like, okay, that's like no nonsense right there. I love that. Like, hit them with it, Kelly, but you hit them with the facts. And like, that's important. And, um, well, me too, being with Disclosure Ladies, whenever we first started that, I mean, we got so much half the stuff that, I mean, it was like, are you guys gonna make us sandwiches? Just the
Ugh.
typical like sexist stuff. But for me, it does the opposite. It's entertaining to me. It's actually entertaining. It makes me laugh very hard. I don't know if that's like a what is it like um almost like a mechanism that I've developed to like not get upset about things. But um yeah, sometimes people like that, I see it as an opportunity to like either like it's always an opportunity to learn about like me and myself. Like, why does this person why what is it that pokes at me? Like, what is it about that gets me? So um yeah, just the fuel that comes from that at the end of the day. I think you do a great job with just keeping it focused and straight to the topic, but then also not losing your voice, which is, I think, the most important thing. Um, and you're definitely heard. So um, I love that. I love that. Um, okay, so I do want to shift over to a few more questions. Give me one second here. And this is, we can kind of go through them, but I really wanted to get your opinion on kind of several different topics. And one of
Sure.
them was going to be specifically about the recent Eror Report. Of course, I have to ask you about the Eror Report that came out. Um, any and all thoughts? What do you think about that? How has Kirkpatrick got you feeling these days?
Yeah, I find it interesting at this point more than anything else. It does make me a little angry. I have my Patreon community and we do like twice monthly calls. And there were some people who on my call, the last call I did, like after the Error Report came out, who were like really kind of emotional about it. I think because, in a lot of ways they had like put themselves out there with family and friends saying like, hey, there's really something going on here. And then that report came out and it was almost like they felt like embarrassed or like, that
Sure.
like, and I think it's tough. Right. And so,
Mhm.
and so there, I have a lot of empathy for that in my own kind of personal life. At this point, I just find everything about Arrow to be such a joke that it's hard for me to, it's hard for me to engage with it too much. I think that when we look back at the history of, I mean, here's what we know is that like Arrow, obviously, I don't have to tell you this, is in this like kind of long history of UFO investigation offices, going
Yeah.
back all the way to like Project Blue Book, Project Red, Project Sign, and what we have in all of that, going back to Project Blue Book, we had Hynek and we had Ruppelt, who came forward and basically said, like, we were never really given the tools that we needed to actually investigate this. We were just supposed to kind of like give an answer so that there was an answer and keep it moving. Fast forward to, Lou Elizondo and,
Mm.
ATIP and, him quitting in protest because he was like, hey, we're not being given the resources that we need to take this seriously. You move forward to David Grush, in the UAP task force saying like, hey, we're not being given the resources we need to take this seriously. And then you have Kirkpatrick for Eror saying like, oh no, it's all fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like he's, it's the whole thing is just kind of it's kind of absurd. And you even just look at their like budget breakdown. I think the
Yeah.
first year that they were in operation, they put $100,000 towards a study with NASA, which is like, that's like a couple of press releases and like some snacks for the break room is what $100,000 gets you. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
then they put over, I forget exactly the number, but I know it was over $1 million that was spent on like PR and perception management. So like that tells you where their priorities are and what they want. I think so much of this is, I think they're afraid of what's going to come out this year,
Mm,
because you even have like Kirkpatrick before that report came out putting out some article that like no one asked for about a program that he's no longer a part of. And the question is really just like, why? Because who is the audience? Like the UFO community, who's not going to be, we're the only people who read it
right.
and who aren't going to take it seriously anyways. And so, but what they're doing by releasing these articles and these reports and all of that is that now this stuff is seeded in Google. And so when people, if things come out later this year, which there seems to be a suggestion that that's going to be
Mm,
happening, then people who are kind of sitting on the fence or have never heard of this before, they're like, oh, let me go to Google. And now you've
yeah.
got something in the New York Times or the Washington Post or, whatever that says like, this is all just silliness. And for a lot of people, that's going to be enough because like that's the paradigm they've grown up in, and they went to school and it was like, you go find a source, and we
Mhm.
assume that we can trust these
Right.
sources. And so, it's not, I'm not even like ragging on those people. I think it's from where they're coming from. It's a logical conclusion. But I think that that's a lot of the game that's being played here, because it all just seems so silly and so ridiculous that I can't even imagine really what they're doing. Because like to put out that 63-page report that said like absolutely nothing is, it's wild. Like I
And
can't even imagine what the point of that was.
and the verbiage too for me. It just that's kind of what really got to me was more of the
Right.
verbiage that was being used because um I don't know, I think more like nuts and bolts. But it all of it. Even his article on Scientific American where he, just it's almost like talking down and then using words like, the aliens and the extraterrestrials and they just, want to believe this and that and the other. And so now I'm wondering, well, after the report, is there going to be what's the role of Arrow now? Are they just going to shut down shop? Is that what's going to happen? Because I know they just get like a new um director. What are they going to do now? Do we know?
Right. No, I mean, it seems like they'll probably just keep putting out reports like this, you know? It doesn't seem like they've shown no indication that they have any kind of an interest in actually investigating anything. And I think that's, absolutely by design. And
Mm,
it's sad that it's happening, and it's crazy that it's been allowed to happen, right? Because we have
absolutely.
whistleblowers that we know have spoken to like the Senate Intelligence Committee, for example. And they're saying like, oh, we haven't heard from any of these people, and these people are like, I completely talked to you, like I showed up, we talked about this. So the lies that are kind of like laced throughout that whole report, um yeah, I don't know what the end game is on that. Like it looks like something that's meant to slow us down, but I don't see how it
Yeah,
could possibly stop the momentum that's been building.
I agree. I feel like that's probably what they were trying to do. Um, and it that's probably their purpose was just to either like bring a lot of us down or, that perception that's always been there about, you know, UFO people are crazy and this isn't real and they're just, a bunch of like I hate saying this, but the term tinfoil hat people, but like that's just like the stereotype, right? And I feel like it was to further push that. So, with that, what do you think the biggest misconception is about the UFO phenomena and topic as it stands right now?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I think I mean, obviously, I mean, I think the most obvious thing that comes to mind is just that, like, when we're talking about UFOs, we're talking about aliens, or that we're talking
Right.
about extraterrestrials, and that, and very specific, and like, and also even when we're talking about that, like, it's a very narrow band within that too. It's like
Mm,
this idea that they're coming here from another planet in crafts that are just like a more advanced version of stuff that we basically have, and that their motivations are very much like ours, and so they're coming here either for resources, or it's some sort of a conquest, or it's some sort of like a scientific research mission. Um, None of which the facts seem to bear out. And I think that, you see that really intentionally, I think, as you alluded to a minute ago, in terms of like the words that Kirkpatrick is using, and the words that were chosen for the UAP task force. I think it's been really cool over the last year to see the rise of this phrase non-human intelligence, because
mm,
I think that, breaking it out of that box is really, really important. And I think we've only begun to break it out of that box and what that really means, because I think all of this is so much more complex than we can even imagine. And I remember when I came to this topic, just being like so mind blown by these ideas of like, oh my gosh, it could be, ultra terrestrials or interdimensionals, or it could be, future humans. And
yeah.
I think, and I think that that's like a really next important part of the stuff to have like with the general public. But I think that when we even push like on those theories at all, they start to kind of fall apart a little bit too. Like, they're just not quite big enough to encompass everything that's happening here, and what we really, and that they still kind of are within this paradigm where something
Hmm.
more or less like us is coming here for reasons that kind of make sense to us. And I think it's probably far more complex than that. But, we have to, it's, it's a huge shift, as anybody who's come into this field knows. It takes a long time to
Mm,
go through it. So I think we've got a ways to go with the public, but I think if we could just express to people that, like, this is far more complicated than it's ever been presented to us publicly. And that we have so many questions that, like, we're not close to answers. Like, we're still on the like trying to figure out how
yeah.
to ask the right questions. So I think that is probably the biggest misconception.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm just taking in what you said. But yes, I completely, my mind goes there too about, how, maybe we just aren't meant to understand it. Maybe it's just more about not knowing that is the most intriguing part. But, you know, I know that some of your influences too that you've mentioned quite frequently, Jack Valet, of course, and then John Keel, and then Hynek, the legends, and then cannot forget the one and only Diana Pasulka, who is just literally just has come out with a bang the last year and a half. She's just absolutely incredible, and I know that you know you know a lot about her research and all the others. So, um, and then just to kind of wrap things up, so I know that we mentioned here that maybe we may not have like the capabilities or the right approach, or maybe the right tools to figure out what the phenomena is and connect all of these pieces together. So, would you like to see more of like a collaboration or more of a change between the nuts and bolts, and more of, I guess, I'm not crafting this question that great. Let me start over. Is there anything that you think we're missing when it comes to starting from like our certain existing process of, well, just going through the scientific method? Of course, you have to use science. No, we have to. But is there part of the process that you think is flawed, or should we maybe try to with a different one that's going to be better to explain these things?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great question. And it's really kind of speaks to what the purpose behind the docuseries that I'm working on is all about. We called it's called The Beyond: UFOs in a New Reality. And, I really like the name The Beyond, because I think that in so many different areas, we need to move beyond our current understanding to get
Mm,
to the next thing. And it does take a really collaborative approach. So just for an example, this last week, um, down in Texas, we were working with Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, and also Dr. Stephen Finley. both of whom work in like comparative religion. And Dr. Stephen Finley in particular has done a lot of work from the side of kind of like African American studies in the context of this phenomenon, which is, you know, bringing like a different cultural context, which is amazing. And I don't think we go there nearly enough. I found that I was a little, it can be intimidating to kind of tell stories that are outside of your culture because you want to like do them service and like do a good job with that. And so I was really glad that we had his help with that. But what I found was that like in understanding more about how this phenomenon is understood in different cultures, that it helped me understand, it really does help you understand get the whole picture better. And I think
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're missing. And I don't always think it's necessarily intentional. I think that we tend to kind of process these things with the people who are most culturally adjacent to us because like we just don't have the right word. Like it's so hard already to talk about things that we don't understand. And so if you having a shared cultural context like really helps. But I think the more that we can kind of like break those barriers down and start making this a larger conversation, the better. So that's like one thing I kind of mean by the beyond. We also had Dr. James Madden down there, who's a dear friend of mine, who, like I said, he wrote Unidentified Flying Hyperobject, which is really kind of breaking down. It's like way too much to go into in a conversation here, but it's really breaking down those categories that we have put under like the different hypotheses of the phenomenon and offering something completely different, really talking through what it would be like to encounter a different intelligence and where they might be coming from and how our own perception both kind of internally and just like the hardware of our perception could be limiting that. So I think, you know, that's a really important part of the conversation. We were also working with Daniel Elizondo, who is, he's Omega Point on UFO Twitter. And he, along with a guy who goes by the Hermetic Penetrator a few years ago, it's a great name, wrote this document, that they released for free called Loose Threads that like goes back and there's this kind of like lost period between, you know, like kind of like the 1970s, like up through like the 1990s and like NIDS and all of that, where like basically what was going on in ufology in the 80s. And the answer is it's actually very interesting. And there's so much that gets like cut out of the disclosure narrative. Like I think that like when we let the current disclosure narrative lead the way, that some of that is intentionally meant to mislead us from seeing the larger picture. And so I think we need to see beyond that and like really do real, like I can't reveal it because he made me promise I wouldn't, but like Daniel discovered some things in the archives of the impossible that will like when he releases it, UFO Twitter will lose their mind. Like he found some stuff in the EdMay files that will blow people's minds, which I think is
amazing.
So cool. And then the final part that I feel like we have to include and see beyond is like we brought in a family of experiencers to kind of talk through what that's like for them. And I don't think we listen to experiencers enough. I feel like we try to focus just on the nuts and bolts and the disclosure side of things. And it's like, we'll figure out the experiencer stuff later. But I think if we're not talking about experiencers, we're not really talking about the phenomenon. And I think people need to stop being so squeamish about it. And that we just need to get real, that this stuff is very, very weird, that it happens to a lot of people, and that we have to deal with like the full scope of the data, or we're missing the boat. And so like, I think all of those things are things that we have to do to kind of move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge part of, you know, we hear the word puzzle piece being said a lot, and that's definitely, I think, one of the big puzzle pieces and part of the chunk of data that we're missing um, to help understand this phenomena better is that side of things, the experiencers part. So it just sounds amazing, the entire project, and I can't wait for it to come out and check it out. So what else? Anything else that you're working on? You know, share with us where we can catch you. Anything upcoming? Anything at all?
Yeah. So I will be at Contact in the Desert, May 31st through June 3rd, and I'm going to be doing a lecture about deconstructing the UFO narrative, kind of like really inspired by the process of the docuseries that we're working on. So I'll be doing that. I'm also going to be hosting a panel of women in ufology, which will be very cool. And I will also be recording a live episode of the podcast down there. So So that's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, and then right around that time, the docuseries will be coming out. So I'll be pretty busy till then, and then I'll be able to take a deep breath, kind of mid June, and kind of figure out what's next.
That's awesome. That sounds so exciting. I'm really like genuinely proud of you, and honestly, just your whole story. I think is pretty inspiring to people. Just all UFO things aside, just literally, sticking with something that you believe in and then watching it grow and be successful. It's probably one of the most rewarding things that can happen. And so I'm super excited to see everything that you accomplished this year. And yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me. And do stick around um, afterwards to catch up. But yeah, so that's it, guys. Episode 6 is a wrap. Thank you all for being here. Also, share in the comments. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Let us know what you think of the episode. Any thoughts or anything, questions or whatever for Kelly, just drop them in the comments and we'll take a look. But thanks so much for being here again, Kelly, and I will see everybody else later. Bye.